Hi, and welcome to episode 11 of Differential Diagnosis, the podcast where we critically analyse and just generally discuss House MD, 15 years after the fact. Today we're looking at Season 1, Episode 12, called Sports Medicine. My name's Harvey, I'm one of the co-hosts, and your other co-host is Gaz.
Pleasure to be here, Harvey, to look at this wondrous episode, which has a cameo with Bryan Singer in it. Fancy that.
It does. He plays a director.
Oh, wow, that's imaginative.
Thankfully not directing any children in light of the recent allegations.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
Only allegations, though.
Only allegedly. Please don't sue us.
Well, yeah, sorry, I laughed when you said it would be a pleasure to review this episode because we do often obviously discuss how we feel about the episode before we go on, so we talk to our points, and I think Gaz is a bit more negative about this one. We've had a bit of a flip from normal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not altogether negative about sports medicine. It's just that we've gone from the surly heights of Detox, where we found out a lot about House, and as I've said in the previous podcast, I think of Detox as the casting off point for the entire show. It really does set the premise of who House is, and, you know, as I said before, the healer that cannot heal himself, but can heal everybody else. And he kind of lives through that. And now we're into this kind of episode, which is a little bit more ordinary, a bit more by the numbers. But
it's kind of hard for House to avoid that, because it's like when the episodes are great, they're so great at the moment that then when they go back to the kind of, just general standard episodes, which are very well written, but they're they're never as satisfying. I totally know what you mean. There's we had a similar issue in it was from DNR to what was the follow up to DNR?
Histories.
Yeah, from DNR to Histories, because we had this great moment with Foreman and that conflict between the two opposing doctors and which one he would go with, and then we went from that to just a nice little story about Foreman hating homeless people. Which, even though it was good, it just wasn't quite as engaging. So I totally because Detox is such an amazing, really important episode to this, there was kind of no way that sports medicine was ever going to fare well.
It's relative to what we've watched before. And
yeah.
But, just if this is supposed to be the moment where the following episode from that casting off point where we know some more details about House and that the series and the entire show gets going from that point.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see. I'm good when we watch through it as we're analyzing it in the round. It will be really good to see if anything comes out of it, and then I go, oh well, maybe I've changed my mind.
Yeah, I mean, in and of itself, I do agree this is a very forgettable episode. I haven't watched the series recently. I casually watch House episodes anyway, but this is because we're now making this podcast. I'm actually actively watching them. Because Gaz properly watched the series, the whole show, for the first time a few months ago, whereas I started watching it again because we then started doing this podcast and wanted to talk about it. But I have to say, as soon as Hank Wigan caught the baseball and the baseball man showed up, I was like, oh, I sort of remember this episode and I don't really want to watch it. But I did, because it was, if I was going back to watch the show, it just wouldn't be an episode I'd pick. It was one of those very slightly forgettable episodes.
Yeah.
Forgettable enough that I forgot what actually happened in it, but memorable enough that I remembered that I really didn't want to watch it as soon as it started.
All I could think about was his kind of coach. Just, I don't know what it was. But there was something always in his mouth. Is that chewing on his tongue or
and
chewing
he's gassy
tobacco?
As well.
And that was just, I don't know, kind of hamming it up a little bit,
I mean, it's repulsive to watch.
So, hey, I'm gonna coach you. Mr. Wiggin. Yum, yum,
My,
yum, yum.
my name's Hank Wiggin and I'm a humble man. Yeah, he's not exactly the most gripping patient ever. But,
That, yeah. That is true. But the coach, oh man, I don't know. Just
well,
too much of a kind of stereotypical sleazeball. I know that's kind of part of the conceit of the episode, because you start second guessing and thinking you know what's happening here. Because in essence, this episode does tackle the idea of doping in sports, and as a person who enjoys baseball and one of the more prevalent, more notorious sports for doping, cycling. I'm a big fan of cycling. I couldn't help but think in those very cynical ways that Wigan was in some way, doping or doing something and not revealing anything. And, well, as we watch the episode, that changes. There's a lot of red herrings in this episode as well.
Yeah, there are. Well, it's definitely trying to... this one's really focused on... it's really focused on trust, which is a recurring theme in the series, because I think by now they've started realizing that being uncertain of whether or not people are telling the truth and having people disagree and throwing in red herrings is a great way to get the patient drama going.
Yeah.
It's certainly the most interesting patient drama episodes where that happens. I don't particularly... I think this one is a bit weak because I don't think Hank Wiggin is a particularly, interesting character, and a lot of the time while watching it I wasn't that invested in him. But there's nothing wrong with the actor. I think it's just the type of character is because he's just trying to be a very humble, self-improving man. He sort of doesn't really... He's quite forgettable.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are a lot of red herrings in this for that reason, because I think by now the showrunners have decided that is a very interesting way to go. It's also a big drugs episode, which is funny because we've just had Detox, which was an extremely, really interesting episode about drugs. But this one is obviously, because as you say, it's about sports doping. It doesn't quite have the same self-destructive atmosphere.
Yeah.
That the last one did.
It's doping to win.
Yes.
Or the presumption that someone is doping to win.
Exactly. Whereas House is just doping to not lose to the abyss, I guess.
Oh my, that's pretty dark.
It's a dark show. So yeah, as always, we watch the episode while we're talking about it to refresh our memories. But we don't just sit here watching the episode; we edit it out. That's just in case you've never listened to the podcast before. And obviously, we would always suggest watching the episode before, so that just you can think about some things yourself, and hopefully disagree or agree with whatever we say. But before we do that, Gaz, why don't you give us a synopsis of the episode, just to fill us in on what the general theme of sports medicine is about?
Well, now you ask, of course.
As if that wasn't planned. Go on.
This synopsis is powered by house.fandom.com, which is a great resource for those that are interested or even quasi-fanatical about House MD.
Really well-written wiki. I went and looked up the character of Gregory House, and the breakdown they give of him is just a really insightful, interesting, borderline literary review of the character. It's an insanely great wiki.
Yeah, we don't take any money, because obviously I don't think they would have any. It's a fandom site.
Yeah.
But I would like to just say, they're churning out the content even now. They've got their recent wiki activity. It's James Earl Jones, 5 hours ago. A fandom user did that. Sex Kills, an episode. Another one is updating Wilson. And
what's been found out?
And Rowan Chase. He's being updated as well. So, and that was 3 days ago. And, that's Chase's dad, by the way.
That makes sense.
But spoiler alert, that's going to happen in this season. So anyway, without further ado, I will recite this synopsis from house.fandom.com. Sports Medicine is a first season episode of House, which first aired on February 22nd, 2005. A famous baseball player coming off a drug suspension breaks his arm merely by pitching. Tests show that his bones are deteriorating, and when a solution is proposed that will mean the death of the patient's unborn child, House must scramble to find another treatment.
Gripping stuff.
I know. As always.
So what we know about the episode by now is that it's a disappointment compared to the last episode.
Yeah.
Gaz isn't really hot on it, and the main character isn't that interesting, so really setting our sights high for our differential diagnosis of sports medicine.
That's a Make America Great Again hat, isn't it?
Oh my God, you're right.
It's the same font.
Fantastic. Maybe he was inspired by this.
I've got to make this cheap joke. Who's on bass? It's Hank Wigan. Sorry, it's a...
It's a very... it's a solid, like... It's a solid opening, in all fairness to it. Like, Bryan Singer's there, which is nice. Good little cameo from him.
Mm-hmm.
But then, we've got Hank Wigan. I think even the fact that he's filming an ad for anti-drugs. We immediately learn that he's anti-drugs. We learn that he is probably not the most charismatic man, which I think comes across via the whole performance. And we also learn from his wife that they're recently married, and that she kind of goes in and directs him better than the director because she knows him. So clearly she has some sort of rebuilding quality. Like, he clearly relies on her. So I'll tell you what, in 2 minutes it sets up a lot of stuff. It's pretty good opening.
I can't get past the MAGA hat. I'm sorry.
That's all right. He'll take it off when he breaks his arm.
But she's geeing him up. She's saying, come on, you can do it. And the director is just standing there impotently.
Yeah, which it's not a big thing. And the patients are always the hardest ones to get right usually, because the patients are in it for so short of a time. Like, in a 45-minute runtime, the patients might not be in it for longer than 15 minutes of screen time. So, this is a better relationship setup than Fidelity, where it's like, where's my electrolytes?
Oh, it's still my favourite line.
Like this, I understand that this couple loves each other and they get on well. And even their coach is with the coach, though, they do the hilarious red herring once again, where he's holding his heart going, oh, just gas. And then he takes some pills.
Just gas. Or is he taking tablet form Pepto-Bismol or something?
Well, exactly. I think it turns out that he's got angina, doesn't it, or something?
Ooh. Yeah. That's a breaker.
Yeah, so he breaks them on a really horrible prosthetic.
Yeah.
And
I blame the MAGA hat. I'm sorry. Do you think Donald Trump watched this episode and saw the hat and said, hey, I like the design of that hat. I want to use it. And now here we are.
But yeah, not a huge amount to say about that cold open. It's
It says it very quickly, though, and very elegantly.
I think that's it. I think that's the highest praise that you can give it. It's for that reason, it's a solid podcast. Whereas
podcast
solid episode.
Seeing everything in podcasts.
I know, I've gone mad.
Yeah.
So but yeah, interestingly, this is another one where Wilson Well, we find out that House is a pre-existing fan of Hank Wigan. So Hank Wigan is clearly a famous baseball player.
Mm-hmm.
I almost said basketball. Sorry. And then, it also starts with House on the phone asking about price. Sounds like he's talking to a prostitute. There's a lot of allusions in the first season, and House even makes jokes that he's talking to prostitutes or having prostitutes, which is quite interesting because at this point House isn't having prostitutes. He's just joking about it, and then later does get prostitutes in the second season.
Don't spoil it for everybody, surely.
Well, no, I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's quite funny that kind of stuff is being set up now, but House is a much purer character because we think, oh, he's getting a prostitute, but it will turn out that phone call wasn't about a prostitute. But eventually he does become that. It's quite strange. It's quite nice that it's setting up House's sort of slow decline even this early.
Do you think it is a foreshadowing thing?
I mean, it could very well not be. It could just be something that they came up with an idea with. But they're certainly establishing that House is maybe more sleazy than he is.
Yeah.
Or is more like, he becomes more inhibited and more kind of hedonistic to distract himself from the pain. And I feel like it's very possible they're setting that stuff up, but I don't know. I can't read the mind of David Shaw, unfortunately.
Yes. Not David Chase this time around. David Shaw.
There we go. And but yeah, Wilson does bring him the case as we saw, and they try and twist the interesting thing in that, Wilson's giving him the case and House is interested not because of Wilson's motives for bringing him the case, but because he deduces that Wilson's confused by the case and therefore he would find it interesting. So they're still playing on that thing a lot, and I do like the way they're doing it. They're mixing it up each time.
Yeah. The other part of the theme, and is it B plot, or would you call it like a parallel A plot? I'd say a B plot, I guess.
Okay.
It's the foreman is kind of engaging in a casual relationship with a pharmaceutical rep, and basically it delves into the transactional nature of a relationship where one person is trying to seems to be using sex as a means to gain access to people, or at least it seems like that.
Yeah. Go more into it more, and because then we can discuss that plot line, because I don't think it's ever concluded.
No, that's the thing. It's an open question, which is really good, because it's because you could read it cynically and say, yeah, sure, she's just trying to get to House, and House even kind of hints that he thinks that's the case, whereas Foreman's kind of like, no, surely not.
Well, I was never sure if House, because so the pharmaceutical rep is having sex with Foreman, they're having a great time, but then kind of the idea of her just trying to get to House is implanted in his head, and multiple people do it, but I'm never really sure if people are doing that screw with Foreman, or that's part of Foreman's kind of worry that he's just still, like, everything he does is related to House. I don't know if it's still playing on that, but I don't believe it's concluded.
No, and it'd be interesting to see at the end of the episode if it does. So
yeah, but another Foreman episode.
Yeah,
good God, like, he's got a whole plot to himself, and even though Chase and Cameron do turn up in that plot because they go to meet the pharmaceutical person as well, it's just like, we had 3 Foreman episodes. We were even joking 2 episodes ago that it was the end of the Foreman trilogy. We had an episode without Foreman, and he's here again.
Yeah.
I mean, like, would it have been that outrageous for Chase to be sleeping with her?
Or Cameron.
Yeah, or Cameron, whatever. It's just, it's just, I don't know. I do like, I like Foreman, I like Omar Epps, but it's so strange that it keeps coming back to Foreman throughout the whole thing. It's like, there's just none of the other characters are getting any screen time. And it's just weird. It's just really weird.
I think it's because Foreman is the most neurotic of all 3 of the fellows. He is super neurotic. He lies to House for no reason.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, when he comes in the office, House asks him what he'd been doing, and you're right, he comes up with a lie, which House sees through immediately. But he could just say I was on a date. But I guess he's becoming so paranoid about House, which is revealed when he thinks that that woman is sleeping with him to get to House.
Yeah.
But he just doesn't want House knowing anything about his personal life, which in all fairness, there is precedent for that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think that plot with Foreman and the main case are related. So my theory is that it's about cynicism, and how, maybe there is a problem in some respects, in the sense that with the patient, we find out that he was getting cadmium poisoning from basically badly grown weed, which he was using to relax. It wasn't from the more cynical view, which was he was using, he was doping to improve his performance.
Yeah, it's drugs, but it's an unrelated reason for the drugs than the sports, which is what they're focused on. Yeah, you're right.
So it deconstructs our cynicism about his case. He just wanted to relax. Whereas with Foreman, Foreman's going in from the reverse. So he's in this kind of relationship with someone who happens to be related to them in a transactional way, but there's something there, he thinks. And then the moment that the cynical thought of it's a ploy to for the farmer rep to get to House, it throws everything off. His entire perception of everything is gone.
Yeah, he thinks she's an awful person when there's no evidence for it.
Yeah,
you're right. It is interesting.
So they're interrelated, I think. It's definitely about the notion of a cynical viewpoint can lead to weird consequences and bad presumptions sometimes.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of lying in this episode as well.
Well, it's the perception is reality element, isn't it? It's like
absolutely. But generally, there is a lot of lying in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
House is getting lied to by Foreman, who's lying to everyone about this pharmaceutical person.
Yeah.
The pharmaceutical person might be lying to Foreman that she's sleeping with him to get to House. House's conversation with the finger quotes prostitute that we saw earlier is actually him getting monster truck tickets, which he then, for him and Wilson to go to. Wilson then tells him he can't go because he's talking at a conference, and then House later finds out that Wilson isn't talking about that conference and is actually avoiding him for other reasons. So more lies. And then we've got the entire patient story, which is literally they assume it's drugs from the start. They're trying to narrow down which drug, and the sports guy just keeps saying, no, I'm not doing drugs. They catch him out. He's like, no, I'm not doing drugs. And it's back and forth until it turns out he is doing drugs.
Yeah.
So an astounding amount of lying. I know that I said lying is a good way to facilitate the drama, but they really ran with it in this episode. Everyone's lying to House in this one.
Everybody lies. Everybody lies.
Absolutely. Which, but that Wilson lie, which I just hinted at, is just a quick one to say, because this episode does have one key detail which we do learn, which is that it turns out Wilson has lied to House because Wilson is having a date, dinner, not a date. Wilson is just going to dinner with an old friend of his, a mutual friend, which also happened to be House's ex-girlfriend, who we don't really know the significance of, but we know for some reason House is very sore about her, Stacey Warner being her name.
Mm-hmm. So the other thing is that House also lies to the patient about the treatment as a means to gambit the patient into admitting his problem, but then doesn't. But it's just webs of lying or attempting to lie or playing with lies as a means to get to the truth.
Yeah, there's just a crazy amount of lying going on in this episode, which is really funny, but it's there's more than normal.
Yeah.
There's a lot of motives being hidden.
Yeah, and a lot of within all the kind of entangled lies, you would think, oh, the farmer rep is going to be a much more strong continuing storyline because of the way it makes Foreman go a bit weird, because he starts perceiving this woman in a very cynical way, but it's actually foreshadowing Stacey Warner. And that issue, which I'm really looking forward to that episode where they go into it.
Yes, well, Stacey is. They're definitely starting to, since Detox, and since we've learned that there's, House isn't cynical just because he is. We learn more about it. We're starting to go into House's pain, and like as soon as you find out that not only has he got a drug addiction, that you don't know why his leg happened, no one's talking about it, and especially now that there's this ex-girlfriend, and House is so completely disconnected. Like he even at the end of this episode, he invites Cameron out to go to the monster trucks, and he is like insistent. He's like, "This is not a date," which is because there's no real reason. It would be slightly inappropriate, but there would be no reason why House wouldn't be open to the idea of like Cameron coming out with him, and hey, if something happens, it happens, and that would be nice. Like House is extremely insistent on not letting her close, and now that we know that there's a previous relationship, which may be the cause of that, really starts prying open. It makes House a lot more interesting.
Yeah, because it adds that other. Because if he was just like a lonely crank, like kind of a Sherlock Holmes figure who doesn't really have a romantic relationship except with one person in the Sherlock Holmes books.
Yeah, Adler.
Yeah.
But that's like still that's like an intellectual kind of like very asexual romance, whereas House isn't like that. So the idea of him not connecting to people is in a way more interesting because he clearly, he gets things from that, like any human being would. He's not like Sherlock Holmes, which is like, borderline like Aspergery.
Oh,
and can't really connect with
not
people.
going to let's not differentially diagnose Sherlock Holmes.
No, absolutely. No, I don't know anything about Sherlock Holmes, but you'd expect. House is more interesting because he should want relationships because he is a functioning man, but he doesn't. And now that we know that there's possibly a backstory to that, it's interesting.
Yeah, I would say at the beginning of this season, he was kind of this kind of godly figure who just wanders in and out.
Yeah.
These things with no real, like a few idiosyncrasies and limping, and he has pain meds for it, and then, but they're there to pain manage. They manage the pain. And, it seems all quite nice and balanced, and everything's starting to go a bit out of kilter as we learn more about him. He's a person who's had a previous relationship. He's got a problem with drugs, which he admits. So, and it's going to be interesting how they bring those things all together.
Yeah,
which is going to happen. The one loose thread I would say that I really want to see explored is Cuddy and House. Why is, if you're watching this for the first time, you're thinking to yourself, why does Cuddy tolerate this man? Despite all of his brilliance, why does she tolerate him so much?
Yeah, she does say earlier in the season that he brings a reputation to the hospital. So we know that House has a reputation, but you're right, he's so irritating that you do begin to wonder whether or not the value is simply reputation and monetary. There's something more there. And I won't be skipping ahead, but I do think the Cuddy House relationship is I do think there's a really powerful kind of connection there, and they do slowly announce more and release more. And I do think it's not only entertaining to watch, it's interesting to learn about. And I think House is one of the few shows as well that does eventually end with the two characters that the fans would want to getting together.
Yeah.
And I think it does it in a really good way. And obviously we are a long way away from discussing that. But yeah, I think it's one of those shows that kind of, at the moment, if you're watching it, you might be like, oh God, I'd love House and Cuddy to get together. Hoodie. I want Hoodie to happen.
Sick.
And then when it does, it's actually, I've heard some people say they don't like it, but I actually think it's really well done, and it's done in a very like interesting and mature way. So, but it's but yeah, you're right. I think yeah. But
Sorry
yet
to
again,
spoil
like,
that for everybody.
no, completely not. Well, I mean, it's not spoiling. Like we're assuming that we've watched it all. It's just I don't. If we start talking about it now and we get all of our ideas out, then when we come to it, we won't have anything to talk about. But we'd just be repeating ourselves endlessly. But yeah, it's But yeah, it's like, but it's a shame that when we're dealing with more form and like, that's what we mean when we're saying there's more form. And it's like, couldn't we have had an episode about Cuddy dealing with something? Wilson, I mean, we know that Wilson might be having a divorce soon, might be having an affair.
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah. But that's looking
everyone's
more forward, I guess. But it's all these kind of little hanging threads that have been kind of exploded since Detox. I mean, we're in the first episode since that. And we're kind of seeing the aftermath of that explosion of the complete deconstruction of House's character.
Yeah.
But it's not deconstruction in the sense that we've revealed everything about him. It's just opened up all of these questions about who he is.
Yeah.
It's blown apart.
And they're being very coy about it.
It's opened up. It's gone from this kind of very closed character who just has this particular gift to a very flawed individual. I also wanted just to comment on the structure of this patient episode. So,
there you go.
What happens is, it just feels like a bit of a game of chicken with House. He tries this treatment. The treatment makes the patient worse, and it can mean either he's taking drugs or he's not. And now his kidney's failing because he's not willing to say or admit that he's on drugs. Or at least he's refusing to say that he is. But the thing is, it's also it's structured in a way where they say, you're on steroids. He says, no, I'm not on steroids. You're on this. And he's saying, I'm not on this. But you must be on that because, look, you must be on this because you're getting really sick. And our treatment would make this condition get worse if you're on steroids, and it just feels like a big game of chicken.
Yeah, completely. And I think
now they're talking about sorry to cut in again.
Yeah.
Now they're talking. We've got to the point where they're at the fellows are at the bar. They start saying about how House has got 4 or 5 women, and it's kind of making light of our questions as an audience.
Yeah, exactly. Because, we know that House is really depressed and alone. Whereas they're like talking about him, like, oh, maybe he lives this crazy life, and he does not, and it's really depressing. Because it's quite funny because we we know that they overhear random conversations, and then we kind of see people theorizing about, oh God, maybe House is meeting with a woman. And then we see him then talking with Wilson where he's like, I've got monster truck tickets. And he's really excited about that. Yeah. And it's it's really funny the way that kind of they're, as you say, because he's so godly, the way they're theorizing about his life. And actually, we're starting to see that actually he's just a very lonely man. And there's not really anything, he's interesting as a person, but there's nothing interesting in his life because all he has is his hospital.
and Wilson at Christmas. Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah, of course. That's all you need, though.
Oh,
I want Robert Sean Lennon to come around my house and eat Chinese at Christmas.
I'll make it happen.
Thanks, good connections. But the whole chicken thing is an interesting way of it is an interesting setup. I don't think Hank Wigan is particularly interesting. I think it's also quite funny that we saw in DNR when House met. He was a huge fan of Henry Giles, the musician. When he met him, they kind of had a really intense conversation. And I quite like in this one, he's meeting Henry Giles, but they don't have anywhere near that because Henry Giles is just not a very interesting man.
You mean
and
Hank
it's almost like House
Wigan?
Goes in and is like, oh, I love you as a baseballer.
You
and
mean
then
Hank Wigan? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, he's got nothing to offer him, intellectually. But so it's this big game of chicken, as you say, and it starts with drugs. but then they flip it, because I don't think the drugs thing would have been interesting the whole time. And it says a lot that when they accuse him of doing steroids, he's like, no. He's clearly on another drug, but he refuses to tell them what it is.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he gets caught out with cadmium poisoning, and they say, you're on marijuana. And then he just kind of cracks and just says, oh, yeah, I'm on marijuana. And he like apologizes to his wife, because he was a drug addict before he met his wife, and his wife helped him get off drugs. That's why it's like such a big deal, because she'd leave him if she found out. So it's, but it's quite funny that like, because he wouldn't know he had cadmium poisoning. He wouldn't know that the weed was related. So he won't tell them that he's taking weed, because he would be like, well, it's irrelevant and I don't want my wife finding out. But as soon as they say the marijuana's killing you, then he kind of goes, well, yeah, I'm on marijuana now that it's kind of, I've got no way out. So, because they're accusing him of being steroids, but he's legitimately not on steroids.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's why he's denying it so hard. But it's, but the problem is that they quickly would have found that out. So then they introduced the plot aspect that his wife is pregnant. He needs a new liver, and in order to give that liver, she is a match. I don't know. She kind of says, "Oh, I'm a match," and they say that's pretty impossible.
Yeah,
and then it turns out she is a match. I'm not sure. That's never really explained.
It is.
I don't know if there's.
It is because she's in the. They sit down and House says, "Yeah, you're a match, but you can't be the donor because you're pregnant." And then that's the moment when the writers switch gears a little bit. They try and up the stakes by saying it's about she's going to have an abortion so that you can live, which is a kind of a weird, it's
but it's another form of chicken. It's like, you know, are you going to kill your baby or are you going to have that liver? And even though the wife makes the decision to do the abortion, he then starts trying to kill himself. Which is that's interesting whether the red herring of the coach having a heart problem comes out, because he steals Hank steals that guy's heart medicine called Digitalis and almost kills himself with it. And then he's playing the game of chicken with like his wife saying, if you kill my baby, I'll kill myself, and then there'll be no reason to go the liver. So like in terms of interactions of like who's playing on who, there's a lot going on, and it's this big game of chicken. But it's nice that the writers halfway through say, well, let's stop making this about drugs because it's not interesting anymore.
Well, they just kind of put it to the side for a moment and then bring it back at the end. It switches. What happens is it kind of switches gears, and then it tries to do this thing where it's aping the stereotypical role of a coach, which is the coach gave them the drugs, and the drugs make them they're the primary doper or source of the doping in professional sports you usually find. And in this case, it's like a bit of a twist on that, where the sports person has stolen the drugs from, it's taken the Digitalis and then used it to try and kill himself rather than improve his performance.
I guess
it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I'll do it again. You try and stop me.
Yeah, which it does turn out that then they find out cadmium poisoning, and there's a nice happy ending. And his wife, I guess, forgives him for trying to kill himself, and forgives him for the drugs. Well, she just says he has to go to more anti-drug meetings. But yeah, while that's happening, it's quite intense, and it's there's a lot going on.
It's an
the scenario.
Sorry.
The scenario itself is more interesting than the patients, which is good, because I do like the wife character. She's like the more hot-headed one. She's like more forceful. She speaks on his behalf, really. But he's because he's not a particularly gripping character. It's that situation itself makes him, by extension, more interesting.
But yeah, now he's having this hallucination of his coach. Which is a kind of strange.
Yeah. Well, the show lets you into something interesting here. This might be a little bit subtle, but because we watch this, weird. It's lit weirdly. It's like the hallucination is done weirdly. It's not really done very dreamlike or like very hallucination-y, but it's there's something odd about it because of the way it's lit, and he's visiting him at like 1 a.m, giving him pills. But
and it's this kind of weird Oh, maybe he is doping. Maybe the hallucination reveals something real about the relationship between his pitching coach Warner and Wigan.
Yeah, which
And,
but the show, by filming a hallucination, is setting a precedent that not everything you see is real.
okay.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah, I see.
Because the show isn't just filming him having a hallucination and somebody watching going, oh, he's having a hallucination. The fact that the show is framing a hallucination like it's reality.
Yeah.
And then you see it from the outside. It's kind of, that does happen a lot in the future, but it's interesting that they took that approach because, I mean, it's a big thing to do because it means that whenever you see something weird happening, you might go, oh, I know that this isn't real because I know that the show films hallucinations as if they're real events. It's just a little interesting thing I noticed, and the show does go on to do it. But a lot of shows don't. A lot of shows won't film hallucinations like their hallucinations. Soap operas don't do it, for instance, I've noticed. Because their British soap operas very much film real events, and then if they're showing a hallucination, they'll show someone just having a hallucination without the actual hallucinatory elements to it. Sorry, a bit of a sideline, but yes, it then also establishes the coach's potential guilt, which isn't true.
Yeah,
as we find
so it's another red herring, and it's subverting that expectation that the coach is the bad guy, that's doping, he's juicing his players so they'll play better. They're not playing a fair game. But the interesting thing is House brings up the clubbing thing again about heart disease. He used that previously with a judge when he was trying to remove an injunction against him in DNR. And he was lying about that, and now he's not lying about it. Because
yeah, that's interesting. So it's like he was giving the same diagnosis, but this time it is actually accurate medical information. He's just not misusing it. He's using it as a way to find something out.
Yeah, because the person has heart disease, which is why he's taking the digitalis.
Well, we do. It's not a huge scene, but we get a bit of clinic time as well earlier with House. Cuddy says that he needs to be in the office. House is like, no, I need to leave because he's off to buy the monster truck tickets. We find out later, but he diagnoses like 5 different people with different diseases in like a minute because he wants to go. And it's I mean, in a way, it's pretty absurd that he does that and jumps to some, but in the same way, like, but yeah, I mean, I think that's the most direct way that the show shows House's, deduction skills, very Sherlock Holmes-esque, that he just reads that many people that way. And kind of the assumptions he jumps to aren't that crazy. Like, it's a bit obvious that some of the patients like have such obvious tells. Like one of them has a bridal magazine sticking out of her purse. So he can tell that her ankle is twisted because she's trying to lose weight for her wedding. Like, it's a good deduction and it makes sense. But yeah, even though it's a bit like the puzzle pieces are placed a bit obviously, like it's nice that the show doesn't make him saying anything too insane. It's like all coherent.
Yeah. I mean, that's
that kind of stuff's done very well.
That's the classic flaw of using deduction in the first place. You have to start from these kind of absurd premises, like you have a bridal book. That means you're a thingy. There's nothing to say that they were just given the bridal book by someone else, and it's totally unrelated to them in any way.
Absolutely. But at the very least, she has a bridal book. Because, I've seen shows that try and have intelligent characters like this. And I think the new Sherlock show on BBC One did this a lot. Like, you might only just have an engagement ring, and then Sherlock will be like, oh, I see that you're engaged, so you're probably about to be married. Like, I think that's a more ridiculous deduction to jump to. I think the show, like, at least does it in an obvious baby step way that makes it, I mean, it's still crazy, but it's like more reasonable.
It's kind of following that Sherlock Holmes route.
Yeah.
It's a nice
Sherlock Holmes does it very well, as you say.
Yeah. It's a nice little tribute. It's a nice tribute.
Yeah. A homage.
A homage.
Homage.
Homage. An homage. And here we go. This is so we're getting to the main confrontation between Wilson and House about what Wilson is really up to.
Yes.
And it kind of feels like it felt like for a moment that Wilson was doing the dirty dog again, was going on a date with someone that House knew, but it wasn't it seemed like a date. It was a social call.
Yeah, you're right. It could be. I mean, because we know that Wilson is possibly having an affair with someone, it's even nice that maybe the show's throwing red herrings for people who are paying attention from that long ago. So many red herrings. Oh my God, what's going on? But yeah, I mean,
it's a veritable fishmongers of red herrings.
Yeah. Also, an interesting thing about the Stacey moment is House gets annoyed.
Yes.
Once again, he doesn't get annoyed very often. So, but he doesn't. He's annoyed, but he rationalizes it because Wilson is asking him. You know, Wilson's saying like, "Oh, are you angry? Like you have every right to be in." House just goes, "No." Calms himself down and says, "I have no right to be angry. She's your friend as well." So I mean, House is angry, but he's also very reasonable. But that little, we've only seen him get really angry twice. Yeah. We've seen him get angry when he's stressed about patients. Because he wants different. The right answer. That's a different. I think. Yeah, different. That's just stress. But the 2 times he's got angry is when he's questioned on him changing because of drugs. That annoys him, and also when Stacey is mentioned, it annoys him. So these 2 new elements of his life that have been brought in, not only are they new and interesting, but they uniquely annoy him.
Well, I think the reason why they annoy him, and this is something that I find it's really good in the way that Hugh Laurie expresses it. It's this kind of conflict between his rational self and his emotional self. He's kind of like, I want to be angry, but I can't. There's no reason for me to be angry, no rational basis to be angry.
Yeah.
He's just angry because it stirs in him feelings of the past that he thinks he should just let go and just continue being the doctor that he is. And that's his kind of thing. He's always looking forward. He's always trying to look forward. He's always looking at cases. He's always investigating something else. He's always moving from one thing to the next very quickly. Well, and anything that kind of makes him look back, especially at the kind of obviously traumatic period in his life, because he wouldn't get so angry if that was the case.
Yeah.
It's that you just could see in the acting the conflict between him getting like, I want to be angry, but I have no reason to be angry. And that's why he says like, yeah, well. It's fine. You can go and do that. That's up to you. I have he even says, I have no reason to be angry.
Yeah, which, just the general acting and the writing as well. Like, it's nice that, because, I mean, I think in a lot of dramas, people are really bad communicators. They just, like, yell and scream, and it's nice somebody calming down and saying, no, I have no reason to be angry. And it's like, you know, just that really clear, like, just communicating their feelings on the subject. Because I find actually in real life, that's more what it's like. Depending on who you know, your life might be beset with horribly irrational people and you might have a horrible time.
Well, you're one of my friends. It's always like that.
Well, exactly. I'm a total nightmare. But I find like, you know, we've never really had a disagreement, but the rare times that we have, I feel like that's more how our disagreements go.
Oh, right.
Unless you see it completely opposite and I'm just throwing shit.
Oh, you mean when you're screaming and shouting like a madman? Ranting and raving. You see that as just a minor conflict that you're resolving in yourself calmly.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why we record this podcast remotely now, because Gaz doesn't want to be in the same room as me.
Yeah. I
edit out all the furious yelling.
Most of the time I'm crying.
Yeah, exactly.
He keeps saying he's going to drive down and get me.
It's boring. Get rid of
it. But it's really interesting. Now we're in this kind of dinner scene. House is in a social situation, kind of, maybe.
He's more gate crashing We do see him do that, but I think for this is not social. This is him being annoying. not being able to switch off. But he's like, you know, the fact that he'll walk in and he'll just start eating this pharmaceutical woman's dinner. Like, he sometimes is on another level of like, there's like all House is being inappropriate, but that's really strange. It's like really bizarre. So, oh, and there's also this nice bit at the ending where they forge Hank's documents in order to say that he hadn't smoked any weed because he would ruin his career. But it's I mean, House probably does it because he is because he's a fan of Hank. But it's just nice seeing those moments when House does something like that. Like, he seems to do something for someone else's benefit, because he would always be like, oh, I don't care, you know, you should live with your mistakes. He's very like high and mighty sometimes like that, but when he wants to, he can do a nice thing. I don't think it's quite an example of House doing something nice for the sake of being nice, but it's up there. It's up there as one of his moments.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. And then at the end of the episode as well, we see a glimpse into House and Cameron's date thing.
Date, not date.
Date, not date. But which we don't see a lot of. We just see them leaving the stadium and clearly having a nice time, which it's always nice to see House on that more social level. He's laughing and smiling, because you don't really see that a lot. But the one thing they do is she asks him a personal question, whether or not he's been engaged before or married, and he's like, oh, let's not make this personal, because clearly he just hates that for some reason. But yeah, he then does bring up Stacey, because clearly Stacey's on his mind.
Yeah.
And it's you know, we learn a bit more. We learn that not only is Stacey's a girlfriend, but he describes her as a woman he lived with for a while.
Yeah.
Which is pretty serious, I guess. But it's quite funny that he doesn't call her anything other than I lived with someone for a while. Like, he was clearly very close to this person, but he's also dismissing it and trying to damage control it in his head that it wasn't that important. So,
well, he's trying to hide stuff.
He's doing that.
He's trying to hide stuff from the fellows, because otherwise, you know, they might, like we discussed earlier, you know, might compromise his authority and his kind of veil of objectivity, which isn't probably, that's the wrong way to put it. It's not a veil. It's just that he thinks it will lead to a misunderstanding, which will make his work as a physician and a diagnostician seem compromised over time by his personal life.
Yeah, because people will assume that he's saying biases where there aren't any.
Yeah.
Like, if he complains about a relationship now, people can say, oh, House is looking at this completely logically. But if House does it after they know about his girlfriend, they'll say, well, you're just bitter about your previous relationship and you're making a bad assertion. And as you say, like, that does happen, that does come up. And it's interesting that you've caught onto it so quickly, because it's like, it's a continuing problem that he wants to be seen as objective. And the fact of the matter is, people aren't objective. And I think that's why, because House is flawed and he makes mistakes and weird biases like that. Especially, we saw it in Detox, where he was denying he was detoxing, and then he was. Like, we start to see that House maybe isn't quite as objective as we thought he was, and might have a couple of demons that are guiding his behavior and thoughts.
But it asks the question of us, which is, do we think House is objective?
Yes, true.
And
and of the team,
do we trust House to do the right thing? He seems to do the right thing all the time.
Yeah, so Chase is definitely on his side with that, in that regard.
Yeah. And Cameron, well, I think that's complicated, it seems. Especially now that out of kind of a weird desperation, he's brought Cameron along. Why not Foreman? Why not Chase? That's really interesting.
Yeah, there's something... He definitely seems to like Cameron the most, which we do find out, and it's actually, I think later in the series, it's actually mentioned that he really loves Cameron in that way, even though she isn't aware of it, other people are. So, you know, unfortunately, we don't see a lot. I mean, you know, we only see glimpses into their lives, and we don't see a lot of the way he feels about the fellows and their hierarchy. But him taking Cameron is a big deal. He clearly sees Cameron as, even though he often thinks Cameron's pathetic in many ways, he clearly is drawn to something about her and likes her in a non-romantic way, which I think makes it more genuine. It would be a shame if it turned into a House fancies Cameron and wants to date her. It would be a bit more shallow.
Although you could say there's like this, she has a similar balance in terms of her character, like Wilson.
Oh, you're right. That's true. She is very Wilson-y.
Yeah, there's a kind of balance between. She's always challenging on the ethics of certain things, even though she's done some questionable things with ethics in this season already. But that being said, she's always kind of challenging House on the level of ethics and on diagnoses. It's not just ethics as well, but in a way that isn't as confrontational and as laden with power plays as Foreman. With Chase, Chase kind of goes yes a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
He also he's more kind of bitchy. He kind of gets a bit kind of bitchy with people behind the backs and goes,
Yeah, well, you wouldn't want to go out with Chase because he'll tell everyone what it was like. Well, I maybe, I mean, we don't know enough about House, but it might be that he is drawn to kind people. Maybe he finds them relaxing. I mean, it is relaxing to be around very nice people. And even though he would say it's a boring character trait, maybe that's why he likes her as well. Like, not just the debate element. Maybe he just finds, the kind of person that'll be like, "Oh, do you want a cotton candy?"
Oh,
and maybe buys you one. That's nice to be around.
I'm going to put my cynical hat on and say,
no, that's fine.
He's like a predator. He has prey.
Fair enough.
He's just toying with the prey.
I think he likes to be
friends.
Unstressed.
Yeah, I mean, he likes monster trucks, so he likes trucking. That's one of his pastimes.
Yeah. Well, I think unless you can think of any more stuff, I think we've differentially diagnosed what little there was, and I think actually I've come out with that thinking that was as you say, because of the positioning in the season, it comes off as initially weak, but there's things hinted there. This is an episode that's I found interesting because of the hints and the allusions it makes to future things. Okay. That's what I got out of it most. What would your summary be?
Well, I think it's twofold. Mm-hmm. The first element that I really liked was the notion of it's so easy for us to be cynical in the face of certain relationships or things with pre-packaged values or warnings or vices attached to them. So in the case of the pharmaceutical company rep, you'd think that's a bit troublesome because big pharma is kind of something morally poo-pooed a lot of the time.
Yeah, even in this season as well.
Yeah, and then you have professional sports, and that's poo-pooed on the presumption that lots of sports people cheat, and that their coaches enable them to cheat through doping. And whereas it seems like, in a way, that was confirmed and refuted at the same time. It was confirmed that Wigan took drugs, but not for the reasons of performance enhancement. So it was true and not true at the same time. That cynicism was challenged, even if the argument was true that he was taking drugs, but it wasn't for the reasons that people wanted it to be or thought it would be.
And there was something more complex than people's initial assumptions.
Yes,
and cynicism. And
so the second one is with Foreman, which is, you think it's revealed that he's in this kind of very casual relationship with this person. He's late. You think he's acting a bit bashful or secretive. It's found out it's a pharmaceutical rep, and then basically what turns out, he's obviously a bit protective of the situation because perhaps he doesn't want other people to think that he's in bed with a pharma rep for those reasons, and he's obviously thinking that this is because they're attracted to each other and they like each other. But that whole perception gets kind of blown apart when House says, yeah, actually it's because she wants something from me, from someone else, and is using you as a means to get access. And in that sense, there's, again, but in this case, it's left open whether that's the case or not. But still, the perception, the cynicism creeps in and spoils everything. In a different way from what it was for Hank Wigan. That's what I would say. But it's playing with this. It's the writers playing with that theme of perception and prejudice and assumption and cynicism. And then we get to the second part of my summary, which is lies and the past
everywhere,
and just web of lies all over the place in this episode. And I think that's probably why I found it a bit weak, was that there were just so many lies flying around. And I know they were trying to be kind of clever, and the main theme of the entire House saga is this idea of that everybody lies. It just felt so overwhelming that everyone's just lying about everything all of the time throughout this entire episode. And
yeah, that's fair.
But that being said, the reasons behind the lies were setups for further examination of episodes. So the lies that Wilson gave about was also that related to him having dinner with Stacey, who has a past with House, who we find out is someone he lived with for a long time. We also get, through that lie, this kind of establishment of a kind of tension between House and Cameron. Not quite a tension, I guess, but something's there. There's a relationship fostering or fomenting or emerging from that.
Yeah.
And then there's just all the lies that happen in the main case as well. He's not on drugs. He is on drugs. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. Yes, you are. Blah, blah, blah. It could have been streamlined. And I think the two kind of story elements are there. I think the first one that I spoke about, which is to do with perception, cynicism, was much stronger than the second one, which was just kind of a fugue of lies.
Yeah.
There's just loads of lies interplaying with each other all the time. Loads of people lying to each other, which was a bit overwhelming. But I would say if I was writing that episode, if I was rewriting that episode, I would have it could have been more lean. It didn't have to be one of the storylines didn't predominantly have to be about Foreman again. It could have been, you could have replaced and put Chase in there.
Yeah.
And had the whole thing play out through Chase. And this, with the confrontation with the urine at the beginning and at the end. And then also have him competing with the pressures of maintaining this relationship and maintaining this kind of sheepish lying and deception about what the nature and manner of that relationship is to his colleagues. I think it could have been more economical, but it is what it is, and they're professional writers and I am not, but that would be my only criticism. And I think the central weakness is the lying is too much. You could have written it so that it was a Chase episode.
Yeah, I think I'm not so against all the lying, but I do think that, I think Hank's a bit weak, which is gonna happen eventually. I think Hank's wife and the coach are more engaging, which is fine. I just didn't really remember that patient story for that reason. But I do, and maybe not even it being about Chase. I agree that would have been a good angle, but I just too much Foreman. It's just
Foreman fatigue.
Yeah, I mean it's more Foreman fatigue. I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. It's because I think if anyone is like, oh, that's a bit too nitpicky, I would say the way we're watching the show, because we're watching it so chronologically now, with a fresh mind, God damn, it's weird when you have 4 episodes of Foreman in a row.
He's
There's a lot of Foreman.
He's
And there's so many other characters that I really want to get to know.
Yeah. He's turning into like the George Costanza of House. He's just kind of bounding around in these like crazy situations. And oh no, what sort of neuroses is Foreman going to have today? Is he going to hate homeless people?
Yeah. Is he going to hate women?
Is he going to have a weird daddy issue surrounding a relationship he's having with a farmer rep? Who knows? Find out on the next episode of House MD featuring Foreman.
No, I know what you mean. It's just strange. Well, oh, cool. I think we've successfully differentially diagnosed Season 1, Episode 12, Histories. Thanks for joining me, Gaz.
Oh, always a pleasure.
And then, right, well, thank you very much for listening, as always. As always, you can, you're already listening to this, so you know where we are, but you can find us in all the major podcast places, including, we put it on YouTube, just because some people don't have access to those. And as always, leave us a comment where you can. You can leave it on our Facebook. You can leave it a YouTube comment. You can leave it on, if there are comments on podcast places.
Twitter.
You can tweet us at HouseMDcast with your thoughts. And and please leave us a review wherever there are reviews available for things. That would be very helpful. But sorry, Gaz, what were you going to say?
No, that was it. Twitter. I was just going to remind you of Twitter.
There we go. Got the whole load. Well, but yes, thank you very much for joining us this week, and we will be back next week with House MD Season 1, Episode 13. And what's the name, Gaz?
Cursed.
Well, fantastic. Oh, yeah, that's the one with the kid from Spy Kids. So enjoy that one.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. We'll see you then.